Does anybody remember the gospel from today's Mass? It's been a long time, and it's been a couple hours. The gospel today was about Jesus getting lost in the temple. Oh, yeah. You know the story, even if you forgot already. It's okay. You don't have to remember. This isn't like a test. But this morning we heard about the Holy Family and a struggle they had. Now, I'm going to tell you that when parents are missing a child for more than 5 minutes, it's like a nightmare. Add it into like hours, and it's even worse. 3 days, I'm surprised all Mary said to Jesus was, "Did you not know that we would be worried, son?" And of course, Jesus kind of, quips back like, "Did you not know I was in my Father's house?" Then it says he went home and was obedient to them, and Mary kept all these things in her heart, which means when you get to heaven, ask Mary the real story. Ask her how that really went down. Like, I know Jesus didn't sin, and I didn't sin, but it was real close. So, yeah, just find out more of that story. So raise your hand, by the way, if you're here and you don't have let's do this. If you have a messy family, like family life's messy. All right, we are not alone. The rest of you just didn't want to raise your hand. That's okay. That's okay, right? So I came from a messy family too. Here's a picture of my clan. Yeah, you're supposed to show pictures of your family, right? So it's been a while. You probably forgot that Steve said that. So just to show you, you heard Steve today talk about this, in his mind, obscure saint, Saint Athanasius. He's actually one of my favorites. We got that word consubstantial from. He talked about how God and mankind came close together and trying to define who Jesus was. Consubstantial, the same nature, same essence as God. Well, my oldest son there, the blonde kid, he's 16, and he'll be at the Life Teen Leadership Conference next week, so that's kind of cool that he'll be there. But his name is Athan. He's named after St. Athanasius. And so we thought Athanasius might get him beat up, so we called him Athan. And then, of course, the next boy you see under my chin, that's Beckett. And Beckett's the one that wants to be a priest. And by the way, we wrote a little children's book about Beckett wanting to be a priest. Isn't that cool? It's in the bookstore, by the way. This is not like a book sale. But Beckett decided he wanted to sign every copy I brought to the store, to the conference. So Beckett signed copies if you'd like to get a copy of that. It does show a little bit more of our messy family life, but really it's about a little boy who's really interested in being a priest. We need more holy priests, amen? We need great men to lead us in the sacramental life. So we pray for that every day in my family. I would love for one of my sons to be, and I told Athan that does not mean you're off the hook just because your brother wants to be a priest. The other two down below, that's Anna Tess. She's my favorite. Have to say that. And then, of course, Kieran, our little caboose, at least our caboose for now. Do not be fooled by that smile. He is the mischievous one of the family. He even put a real snake in my bed, and my wife found it with her feet. Yeah, and he smiled about it. So that's my clan, and we're kind of a wreck. I'll tell you a story, just the difference between how parents parent. So my kids, they're all hanging out in the house. My wife decided to go to the grocery store. And so she leaves me in charge, and this is the day I realized you're not allowed to say you're babysitting your own kids. That, you can't say that if you're the dad. I'm still trying to figure out that term, and my wife said, it's called parenting. Okay, thank you. I heard a name, and that's great. It's probably from a mom. Okay, so my wife went to the grocery store, so I was in charge. And so my kids, I'm like, you just can't be on devices. You can't be on, a screen or watching a show, enough of that. So my kids, my older two, went outside. This is a few years ago. And they invented this little game called Papacito. Now, where I'm from, Papacitos is like a great Mexican food restaurant. But I think in Spanish, it all sounds like, is that like Little Dad, Papacito? I wasn't sure, if they were making fun of, is that right? So I think they're actually making fun of me. Little Dad. So Dad's in charge. They've called the game Little Dad. So they go outside and they grab the wagon. You know those little radio flyer plastic wagons? I think the reason they made them plastic is because they go faster than the little metal ones. And my kids would get at the top of the driveway and they would run like they're in the bobsled down the driveway. And out in front of my driveway, there's a street There's like one lane going this way, one lane going the other way, and then there's a curb on the other side and a house across the street. You got the image? Okay, so my kids are out there, and they're playing this game they called Papacito. They run like they're in a bobsled. They run down the driveway, and before they get to the end of the driveway, they hop in the wagon together. So no one's pushing or driving anymore. They're just hopping in the driveway, and they go across the street, and right before it plows into the curb, they stand up in the wagon. They jump to the grass, do a somersault, and then the wagon hits the curb and goes end over end as well. So my kids come inside. I'm telling you what it looked like before I went out. They came inside, and they're like red-faced, and they're like, Dad, you got to see this. Now, if they'd said that to my wife would have been like, don't go anywhere. Is anyone hurt? Is anything broken? Did you break any laws? And I'm like, okay. So they lead me outside, and they get in the wagon. They do the little Papacito. They're running down the driveway. They jump in the wagon. They go across the street. It hits the curb, end over end. They're safely out doing a somersault. And it was the best thing I'd ever seen. And so I said, guys, this is awesome. I'm going to film it this time. So I go down into the street, and I get on one knee because I'm protecting my kids, right? Let me make sure no cars, right? So I'm down in the street, and I'm filming, and they get up at the top, Papacito, down the driveway, across the street, into the curb, somersaults, perfect landing, perfectly captured. Here's where it went terribly wrong. My wife was at the grocery store. I decided she needed to see the video. So I text my wife the video, and I'm like, can't wait to see her response. Idiot. So then I see the little 3 dots, dot, 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 dot. I'm like, I can't wait. Can't wait. 3 words. What the hell? And I'm like, you're right. Helmets. They need helmets. So they get back at the top of the driveway, say, we're going to do this one in slow motion. You got helmets. I'm blocking traffic. I start to film, and just as they come down the driveway, I hear honk from behind. It's my wife. She left her half-full cart of groceries in the grocery store, ran to the van, drove the 3 minutes home to save, as she said, their children from their father. And mom's out there. I see her face like, you are an idiot. So yes, we parent different, and I know that's kind of like a fun story, like we're a little crazy and we don't do things great, but there's more to my family than bad parenting. I've had a dad in my life, and I have to credit him with the biggest gift that I've received in my life, and that is that he introduced me to Jesus. He's the one that shared the faith with me, not in a like teachy way, but in a very real, authentic way about a relationship. I got a picture, I think, here of me and my dad. And I talked to him just before I came out to talk to you guys. And the other thing about my dad, though, that from the time I was 11, he had a heart condition. And so I was the kid on like campouts, you know, that like my dad had to stay back at the campsite, and I had to go with like the other boys and their dads. So from the time I was 11, really, even before that, my dad wasn't there in a like companionship way, like accompanying me in all the little things that like kids do. Now he'd get out in the front yard and throw the ball with me for a little bit, but it just seemed like there was something missing from like that part of my formation as a young boy becoming a man. But he introduced me to Jesus, so he did give me that greatest gift. Well, my dad had a heart attack. He had triple bypass surgery. And then about 20 years ago, at a very young age, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And so now my dad lives in an assisted living place. And just this last week, my mom called me in tears, and she's living by herself, although she used to be his main caretaker. But she would call me and say, your dad is like hallucinating. He said this week he thought his skin was falling off. He thought he was black. He thought he was a nurse. Like it's almost like something's happening, right, in the Parkinson's, the way his brain is like processing some of this. Like it's almost in a sense like he's losing his identity, who he is. And so when I called him just before I talked to you, I just want to tell you that little messy family I showed you a picture of a second ago, and I didn't know this, they were sitting in his room at the assisted living place just now. They went to visit my dad while I'm here with you guys. And it's like it gave me permission just to share with you all, like, this has been, it's funny, my glasses, if you were here earlier, my glasses are fogging up, which means I feel it greatly. That my dad's been such an important part of my life, and I feel like time, in a sense, is running out. And I know the value of having a dad in your life, because I also realize some of the things my dad and I missed out on. And I know some of you might not have the best relationships with your dads. They might have been absent. There might have been even bigger, more painful struggles than that. And maybe it's just us as dads don't know how to do it very well. Like, we haven't had the best model. So I have tried to employ what my dad did, and that is just to love my kids as much as he loved me and share with them the greatest gift my dad gave me, which is a faith in Jesus Christ. So one of the people not in that picture, here's a picture of that next picture. This is Mary Claire, and she was my daughter that we lost 15 years ago. She'd be a senior this year. She'd be at her final Steubenville conference, and we lost her when she was 2. She went to bed with a fever and a cough and didn't wake up the next morning. And I tried to revive her. I found her. We brought her to the hospital, and they couldn't do anything. And so I also realized from a parent's perspective that that's every parent's worst nightmare. And if you all probably knew, even if your parents can't share it with you, that you mean the world to them. That they would not have supported you and sent you to this conference, even some of them almost begrudgingly, or maybe they had no idea it was even going to go on here. But they see you as their most prized creation in the whole world, because they were part of that. They helped bring you into the world, and their job, whether they take it seriously or know it or how well they're doing, because we all fall short of that, their job is to help you get to heaven. And so here's what my imperfect family would look like. An artist made this picture, and this has my daughter Mary Claire if she was a 17-year-old teenager in our house. This is the first family picture she's ever gotten to be part of. To show that beyond where we are here, that our family is this eternal sign of God's presence in our lives. And I can't wait. I've got one more reason to get to heaven, to see my daughter. I'm not trying to get there in a hurry, because a lot of people here, I feel like, depend on me. But I want to tell you that family life, there's a lot of grief in family life. And family life, grief has a lot of faces. Grief does not just mean if you lost a child or a parent or had an absent parent or some sort of abuse in your life. That's not the only thing that grief looks like. But those are all faces of grief. And I know every one of you came to this conference with a little bit of family baggage. And I can tell you that the Lord wants to heal that. And I want to share this quote with you. This is what Pope Francis said at the World Meeting of Families in 2015 in Philadelphia. Philly, get up for Philly, yeah? Were you guys there? Family was there. It was great. This is what Pope Francis said. Families have difficulties. In families, we quarrel. Sometimes plates fly. I guess that's people throwing kitchenware. And children bring headaches. And I won't even speak about mother-in-laws. By the way, that's the hardest relationship in my life, was my mother-in-law. However, in families, there is always light. Just as there are problems in families, there is light of the resurrection. I love this line. The family is like a factory of hope. In the family, there is indeed difficulties, but there is always hope, because those difficulties are overcome with love. So your job when you go home is not to make the perfect family. Your job when you go home, probably when you go home, that's sometimes in your judgment, like, that's what makes my family not perfect, right? Is like, I've got my own set of problems. But I want to give you some practical ways that you can be fearless in your family. It's not to take away all of the grief and all of the struggle, but here's just some practical ways that you can be fearless in your family. First, you may have to be the leader. You may have to set the example. Maybe your parents are doing a good job of that already, but maybe you've got to go home and show them what it looks like to be fearless in your family, to be a factory of hope. And it might start with you. So that's the first thing, just so you're on notice that this might be you leading. This is a big one. You may have to forgive first, even if they don't deserve it or reciprocate it. Forgiveness is like love. It's not just given when it's deserved. You may have to be the first to forgive, even if they don't deserve it. Because when you hold on to a grudge, it's not hurting the other person. It's just hurting you. Third, you may have to start going to Mass or to confession or both by yourself. I don't mean because you're sick of your family, like, I'm going without you. What I mean is, if they're not the ones getting up on Sunday morning, if they're not the ones prioritizing it, how can you get to Mass? How can you set an example to lead first by choosing to go to Mass yourself? And that might mean confession, like maybe some of you, and I know this from being a youth minister for 20 years, that teens would come on high school retreats, and that would have been their first time to go to confession since their first confession. And maybe that's like that for you here. Maybe you've never been, or maybe this has been your second confession, or it's about to be your second confession. How to do this back home, how to take this real life experience and make it real life when you're back home. Next, refrigerator rules. This might mean where you're going to have to help your family just come up with some things that hang on the refrigerator that say, like, here's the things we're committing to, or here's how we're going to treat each other. We in my family came up with a social contract and core values, and I'm not about to break that out for you right now. I'd love to share with you more about what we did there, but it can start with a sticky note on a refrigerator. Like, we're not going to bed mad. We're not driving off mad. We're not going to use certain words, which we probably won't write on this sticky note. Like, come up with some basics. Like, doors are not allowed to be slammed. So let's come up with some of those. And then finally, pray every day. Pray every day, and specifically pray for your family. Pray for the instances where your family needs healing. Pray in thanksgiving for the ways that your family is growing. But pray every day, and then here's the stretch. What would it look like, some of you that are used to maybe praying every day, to say to your family, could we pray together? That's when you will start to see your family become a factory of hope. Not a family of perfection, but a factory of hope. And if you ask for the intercession of the Holy Family every day and keep them as your model, at least we have a signpost. And then finally, and I'm going to ask Rachel to come up here and join me in a second. There's a great quote by Mother Teresa. She said, "Do you want to change the world? Go home and love your family." That might be hard enough for some of us, right? But if you want to change the world, go home and love your family, because what the world needs, as St. John Paul II said, are domestic churches, families that act like small communities. And it can start with you, even in the middle of the mess. So this isn't about perfection, it's about holiness.
Hi, I'm Michael Pat, and I just have a question about distant family members and stuff, because I have some difficult relationships in my family, because a lot of my grandparents really hate Catholics. And so I've always heard forgiveness and preach forgiveness and you gotta forgive everyone. But some instances recently where one of my grandparents was insulting my mom, her own daughter. And it's just really hurt, and I struggle so much to be charitable toward her because she's attacking someone I love so much. And I just want to know if you've ever had to deal with that, and if so, how do you put up with so much hate from someone who's supposed to be a good example to their own kid,
So I want to make sure I understand the question. So family members, close parents, who are antagonistic or mean about your faith. Well, I am so sorry that that's your reality, first of all, because I can't imagine, my family is Catholic to a degree, but nobody is that antagonistic. But I do know that when there is conflict in generations like that, the hurt can get passed down through generations. And I think there's some consolation in the fact that, Jesus says, if the world hates you, they hated me first. And he's been there and he knows how that feels. And he also says to pray for your enemies, And so I think on a practical level, when you have interactions with her, to just be as respectful and kind as you can. You do not have to sit there and take abuse, okay? But to just say, oh, okay, thanks, Grandma, okay? And then change the subject, right? Let's talk about anything else, Grandma. And then in your own heart, in your own prayer time, to just offer her to Jesus and pray for her healing. There's probably a reason she hates Catholics. There's probably a hurt in her life that caused that. So to pray for her healing, maybe pray for her conversion, for the openness of her own heart, and then for your mom, and the ripple effects of that. Everybody who's been hurt by her hurt,
So my mom came from a Baptist family, and my dad from a Catholic family. And in college, they wanted to get married. And my dad's family said, you're not marrying that Baptist girl. And my mom's family said, you're not marrying that Catholic boy. So they eloped. They went to the courthouse, unbeknownst to my grandparents, and got married. 3 months later, they sat my grandparents down and said, Mom and Dad, we have something to tell you. We're pregnant, but it's okay because we're also married. And so began this great ripple effect into our families, having, faithful Catholics, faithful Baptists, like kind of sparring. My grandmother is now 94 years old, and she's Baptist still, and she comes to church with our family all the time and just sits there and kind of scoffs at what we do. And it's like, am I going to convert my 94-year-old grandmother? Maybe, but it's not my job. That's the Lord's job. But I can pray for that, but it really is how I treat her at this point. It's like, as I told you, my mother-in-law and I had a very contentious relationship. I had to just choose, because love is a choice too. I had to choose to love them. I know we like to kind of wrap love up as like an emotion, and there's butterflies when you're attracted to someone, but love's a choice. And so I just had to choose to love my grandmother, and I love her to death. Hope she's like, is this being streamed, by the way? She's probably watching this. This is going to be really weird. Hi, grandmother, I love you. But just loving her, right? She still sends me birthday cards, and she still comes to church, even if she sits there with her arms crossed. Yeah.
So in a family with really busy schedules, everyone's like not home at the same time, what's a good way to pray together? And what's a good way to encourage other families to pray with you who maybe aren't like anti-Catholic, but aren't super involved with their faith?
Did you say other families at the end of that?
No, like siblings.
Oh, okay, siblings. Okay, good. You want to try that? You want me to? Okay. So, yeah, busy schedules, right? Especially now, I'm getting a different feel for that. Like, I'm going to assume Rachel with smaller children is not running around taking all of her children to all of their things.
Everyone in bed at 7 o'clock or else. Okay, yeah.
That ain't how it works here. I have kids, now you all probably know what this is like. I have kids that go to bed before I do. I'm sorry. I have kids that go to bed after I do. That's how weird it is. I don't know how to say it. That's how weird it is. Like, I go to bed and I'm like, good night, Athan. Don't stay up all night, right? So busy schedules, right? They're still studying or they're out doing events. I think the best way is before everybody starts to do their own thing at night. So that's the time we found. So it's like after dinner, and it's before like we start getting the little ones ready for bed. So it's really like the youngers kind of drive, like they're about to go to bed. The olders are going to do some more things, or like my high school boy is going to call his girlfriend. So like, okay, let's pray now. Let's prioritize it, even if it's a family decade of the rosary. Or we do something, here's what we do at home. This makes it interesting. We do what's called roses and thorns. You ever heard of that before? And everybody can do it. My 9-year-old is almost always first to go and tell us a rose and a thorn. And everybody can do it. And what we do, we model that when we have even friends from out of town that are staying with us. We all gather in the living room and do roses and thorns.
Can you explain it for people who don't know?
So a rose, like a rose has thorns on it, right? So the rose is the good things and the thorns are the bad things or symbols of. So roses and thorns would be like, today, what was a rose? What was a good thing? And what was a thorn? What was a bad thing? And it's a little more, it's less threatening than like, tell me how the Lord's working in your life today. Now, that's fine to share, but Kieran might be like, I ate a brownie, you know? So like we just break it down and everybody can participate that way. So I think it's more about like not what you do, but can you do it regularly and can you do it all together?
Sorry. Hello, my name is Daniel. I come from a pretty big family, and just for like different reasons, like personality and stuff, I kind of have felt a little bit like different than all of my siblings, and I love them all very much, but because like I'm just a little bit different than them, it kind of makes it hard for me to grow close to them the way that some of them are close with each other just because they have similar interests and hobbies and stuff. So how would you go about trying to build close relationships with your family even if you don't feel like you completely fit in with the big family?
So my mom is number 4 out of 10. Okay, so 10 kids who span 20 years. There's 5 boys and 5 girls, very symmetrical. Well done, Lord. And so in that family of 10 kids over 20 years, there are a lot of different personalities. There are a lot of different interests and hobbies. And even like now, they're all obviously adults, different levels of education and different experiences. Some are married, some are single, some are divorced, And so it's been cool for me to see in my mom's family how even in different seasons, different siblings will be close to each other. Like growing up, these two were super tight, and then now as adults, actually these two get along better. And so I would say, like, don't lose hope if right now it feels like you're not clicking with anybody, because as time goes on, as you guys have more life experiences in common, I think some of that will naturally evolve, and you'll have those things. And I think the other thing, too, is just anytime there's somebody I'm trying to get along with who maybe I don't have the same interests or hobbies, curiosity is a great friend in that. So just to ask them questions. People love to talk about themselves. We're all a little bit narcissistic, okay? And so, like, what are you up to? What's happening at school? What's happening with your friends? What's happening with your team? Just to take that interest in their own lives, I think can very naturally help build the relationship if the relationship is not really there yet.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I wanted to know if you have any Bible verses for cause me and my mom, we don't really have a really good relationship, and so I was wondering if you have any Bible verses in which I can pray. I can use to pray, so we can I guess have a better bond or something like that,
Well, start with a couple. One one method would be to get a devotional that has the daily readings that kind of follow the Mass. That way it's changing, but it's following the rhythm of the church. If you went to Mass or not, you could still read the daily readings, and they have devotionals for these. The priest sitting next to you can probably whip one out of his habit and hand it to you. Another thing is taking a book in the Bible like the Psalms or Proverbs that just have little bite-sized nuggets and just kind of work through it together, almost like sitting down together. There's all kinds of verses around this inspiration or that inspiration, but they'd be more in the moment. I'm going to use this when I'm sad. I'm going to use this when I'm giving praise. I'm going to use this when times are tough. But if you worked through something like that together with your mom, like the daily devotional, that's another way, talking about when to pray together as a family. If you kept that devotional on your kitchen table and just said, okay, little brother, you read the gospel for today, and you read it over dinner. Something simple that everybody could tie into, or maybe if it's just for you and your mom. There's also great devotionals out there. Rachel will probably share more about if she knows any women's devotionals, but there's a great number of them out there. If you found one that your mom and you could be committed to and do together, I think that would be a really beautiful thing.
I think don't forget also that you have another mom in Mary. And so to be in the Gospels, in the moments where Mary is, and all the things that Mary experiences as a mom can help you, number one, to feel close to a mom, right? Close to a mom, but then also to ask Mary to pray for your mom, to ask Mary to pray for you and your mom in your relationship. Mary's full-time job is to pray for us. That's all she does all the time for eternity. And she can be a great mom for us in those moments and help us in those relationships with our own mom. So I would say get in the Gospels, get where Mary is, and grow closer to her.
That's a good point, too. How many of you have like a prayer spot in your house? Like there's a spot that would be like, doesn't have to be like a chapel, but like how many of you have a prayer spot in your house? Okay, that's not a whole lot of you, but how many of you right now, just for a minute, think at your house, how many of you could create somewhere in your house a little prayer spot? Like that spot comes to mind, like, yep, this would be the perfect spot. Raise your hand. Maybe start with that. Like go home and say, hey, look, we got busy families, but if we create this little prayer corner and that was just like a sacred moment, like if you passed in front of it, you said a prayer, or, you know, you had like an image of Mary there, a statue of Mary there, you could create that in your house. When we go back to that domestic church idea, how can you reclaim what's going on inside the four walls of your family for the Lord? Just as a symbol of that. There's a reason we put statues in churches.
Hi, I'm Grace. I need advice on like a certain thing that I go through a lot with my parents. So we like butt heads a lot, me and my parents, and I usually, before I get to express how I feel about like whatever's going on, I usually get yelled at and like shut down, like before I get to explain myself. So do you guys have any like advice or anything on how I can fully express myself before I get shut down or anything like that?
Pray, before you have an encounter like that, if you know it's coming. Pray for your parents, pray for their hearts to be open every day. And then if in the moment you're trying to express yourself and it's not going well, which happens to the best of us, often, maybe something to do later would be to write a letter. And then you have the freedom there to get out everything you need to say, and you can put it in their hand or slip it under their door or leave it on the seat of their car for them to find when they go to work in the morning, whatever, but then you've put it out there. And Matt talked about how sometimes in our families we're going to have to be the leaders. Sometimes we're going to have to initiate. Keep that in mind also, though, that it is not your job to be the parent. And so even as you initiate, even as you try to bring healing and express that, ask Jesus for the help, for the grace to then let it go. You put it out there and you let it go. And how your parent responds is on them, right? It's not your job to fix their communication patterns. But you can try and you can offer, and then hopefully you can have the peace of knowing, like, I've done what I can do here. I'm really trying, I'm really putting the effort out, and try to rest in that.
And I think that's a great idea to like write a letter. And I will advise that if you do write it down, write it before you get shut down. That way you make sure you've done it like with your most thoughtful mind before your emotions are now like dealing with getting shut down, because then you either might write some things you don't want to write, or you might not write as clearly as you would have beforehand. And one thing I do when I'm coaching pastors and their leadership teams, actually, again, there's one group that's here, that parish I work with, is we talk about something called crucial conversations. And there's a great book out there, although I don't want to necessarily get you all to go buy this book because it's kind of a thick book too, and it might not apply to everybody. But the premise around crucial conversations is the moment we know we need to have one of those crucial conversations, which is what these are, is when the emotions are high, when there's a difference of opinion, and there's high stakes, like something very important, there's a difference of opinion, and our emotions are high. So if you kind of feel that going in, like, okay, I know this is going to be a fight, that's emotions are high, this is a big deal, even if it doesn't feel like a big deal to my parents, it's a big deal to me, and there's a difference of opinion, something like curfews, this is about to be a crucial conversation. And it doesn't mean like you go in and say, we're going to have a crucial conversation. But it does prepare you to say, okay, like you know what you're going to get into. And it helps you think a little bit more clearly through it before your emotions take over. Because what happens when your emotions kick in, two things happen. You either fight or flight. So by nature, how many of you are flight? You like run or hide from conflict? How many of you fight, like you come out swinging? And sometimes it depends on the situation, but we're normally wired for either fight or flight. That's because of our emotions. Our emotions create in us like this chemical reaction, Because back, when we were like cavemen and women, like adrenaline ran through our bodies, so you could either kill the woolly mammoth or run from the woolly mammoth. But now our parents are like taking the place of the woolly mammoth. So we can't kill them or run from them, probably. You could run to the other room. Don't kill them, please. But it does show you why you're having this like emotional response to fight or flight. So when you can get in front of it and know what's about to happen and maybe even write it down, that can be a good tip. Sorry, that was some geek stuff there. Sorry.
Alrighty, so I have a question. So we have a rocky road with my sibling and I. She's 21, I'm 17, I'll be 18 in February. So as I've grown up with her, I've seen her, she has a boyfriend, I've seen her made bad decisions. And me being the younger one, I want to like kind of talk to her and be like, hey, so I know I'm younger than you, but I know you're doing not bad things, but like I just want to make sure you're okay. And she always is like, no, I don't want to talk to you, and she just ignores me. Are there any like suggestions of like how I can maybe grow closer to her? Because we're like, she goes to college in Missouri and we're like separated, so any suggestions?
No, but I will tell you this. I mean, every situation is different, right? What's going to work? But I would tell you my older brother was 8 years older than me. And my younger brother is 4 years younger than me. So there's this huge span. So when I was 8 years old, my older brother was starting to drive. When I was 16, he was graduating from college. So just our lives were on different trajectories. And it actually wasn't until later in life that we created these close bonds. And we're like, the three of us are best friends now, which is a great gift because I never saw that growing up. Like when I was younger, I was like, man, my brother doesn't want me around. I'm like, crimping his style here. So now to be such good friends with him is such a beautiful thing. So sometimes I will tell you it's going to be patience and time, and maybe just you staying present even if you're not actively, giving her advice.
Hi, I'm Bella. Kind of a question that is a combination of a couple of the ones that were asked earlier, but I am the oldest of 7, and I'm a freshman. That means that my younger siblings don't really have a super busy schedule like I do. They don't have all of the things yet. And I know for a fact from some of them that they kind of feel like I've abandoned them or that I just don't think about them anymore. How do I let them know that I still love them and they are my family and I want to spend time with them?
So I saw a thing on Instagram that got me, and it was on a parenting thing, but it said your kids would rather have 100% of your attention 10% of the time than 10% of your attention 100% of the time. And I don't think that's just true for little kids. I think that's true of all people. So not that you have to spend 24/7 with them. That's not real. That's not practical. That's not how your life is going to be. But when you are with them, be with them. Give them 100% of your attention, even if it's only for 10 minutes, You got 10 minutes before you got to run out the door to school. Like, hey, what's going on with your day today? What's on your plate? Anything you're excited about or nervous about, right? To just really, focus on the people you're with when you're with, which I think is something we can all do better at, because we all got things going on. We're all running around and trying to multitask. So they'd rather have 100% of your attention 10% of the time. So when you have that time, give them your time.
For me to get to that, I have to put my cell phone down, and I'm not really good at that. Just admitting that here in front of a bunch of teenagers. That even as a parent, when I put my phone down and I get down with Kieran and I'm present with him doing whatever he wants to do, even if it's for 15 minutes, I'm going to do that when I get home. Thanks for asking that question.
My mom hates my father's parents, and anytime they come down to try to spend time with us, she always makes an excuse to get out of the house. Or whenever we try to go and visit them because they live a while away, she does not want to go with them. So I don't know how to encourage her to spend time with them because they're great people. They're Christians and everything. And so I don't understand why she doesn't like them. But.
What's your name? Allison, thanks for asking that question. I would say, first of all, there's a difference between loving and liking. At least this is how I phrase it. My mother-in-law, I did not like her, but I love her. because the love was a choice. And so when she would come to the house, I never wanted to sit down and have a conversation with her. And I didn't, but I just chose to love her. So maybe the expectation a lot of times isn't that like we somehow make everybody in our families get along. I mean, isn't Thanksgiving a weird thing? Like, hey, let's gather all the dysfunction together and sit around a table and talk about it.
And be grateful for it.
And we're gonna and be grateful for it. And we're gonna call it a holiday, right? We're even gonna give you the day off so you can do it all day, right? And so Thanksgiving can kind of be a hot mess for us, right? Especially all of us messy family folks. So I had to just choose on Thanksgiving that like every ridiculous thing she said, I just kind of didn't bite. And I'd get up, like, you know what I'd do sometimes? Can I take your plate? And I'd go put it in the sink and like viciously wash the plate, you know? So I was taking it out on the plate and not on her face kind of thing, you know? So I don't know that maybe we need to just manage our expectations. Our families are not always going to get along. But maybe we can just choose that a loving presence is going to be what we get.
Nice.
Like that?
Yep. Solid.
Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us.